modeling Metallica. On September 24, 2018, the big news arrived just before lunch. The biggest name in rock music, Metallica, was coming to our town, Tartu, and social media was instantly set on fire. Interestingly, while Twitter had the most individual posts, it was Facebook that had the furthest reach. When the official Metallica account tweeted as the band took the stage, it reached an estimated 5.7 million people. However, that same message, when posted to Facebook, was seen by 36 million. Just how was Tartu, a city with little under 100,000 residents, going to cope? One day after the gig was made public, every single hotel, hostel, guest house, and bed in town had been fully booked, a solid 9 months until the band would touch down. Another 3 days later, all the VIP and special fan zone tickets had been sold. The hype showed no sign of letting up, and by March, 50,000 tickets had been sold, prompting the promoters to add another 10,000 tickets just days before the event. Oh yes, this was going to be big. It's not difficult to imagine the challenges that 60,000 guests would present to the city of Tartu. One small group within the city government decided to take the advantage of this unique opportunity. Having a legendary rock band visit Tartu is kinda rare, but not necessarily a once-off. They looked for new ways of analysing how their city transformed under the pressure and how to do an even better job in the future. Thankfully, this was not the city's first foray into data gathering. Just a few years ago, the Tartu Smart City project was founded, and one of the activities was to place sensors all around the town, scanning for changes in the air, reporting noise levels, measuring energy efficiency, and monitoring traffic, all aimed at securing a sustainable, smart urban environment. The tools they needed were already positioned around the city, hiding in plain sight. In 2019, Tartu released more than 500 electric bikes into the city for everyone to use. The bike share effort became an overnight hit, and the bikes themselves became another sensor to analyze traffic flow. These hundreds of bikes allowed for a detailed view of which routes and streets were taken when cars were not an option. However, the data didn't just come from the city's resources. Dozens of private companies responded to the city government's appeal to provide data to create this detailed model. On July 18, 2019, 9:04 a.m., our cameras were monitoring movements on the road leading into the city. They had been drawing their familiar graphs since the early hours, welcoming drivers living in surrounding areas on their way to work. By noon, 60 vehicles were seen going past every quarter hour. Then it was 65, 85, 97, then 100, and we knew something big was happening. Shortly after lunch, a few thousand ticket holders from Latvia and Lithuania were spotted, and soon after that, we saw 1,000 fans from Russia that we witnessed as data points on the Narva Road. Ticket sale data had shown us that fans were coming from over 50 countries, but there's only one scheduled flight between Tartu and the outside world, a midnight arrival from Helsinki. Now, we did see an increase in charter flights, a 10-fold increase in fact. Now, this sounds impressive until you know that last year, charter flights brought in a grand total of 3 passengers to Tartu. From that, we surmised that the vast majority of fans were landing at the larger Tallinn airport. Flight data from the day was broad, as we didn't set out to track individuals. However, we were able to identify 4 very special guests arriving on a 4:30 p.m. charter flight from Copenhagen. The gigabytes of data files acted as our eyes and ears in the outer city intersections, but as soon as the cars had passed our cameras, they were lost to us. There were no sensors embedded in the narrow inner city streets. However, relying on a combination of dozens of other data sources and finding connections and anomalies inside of that data, we were able to continue the journey. Whereas most accommodation providers found themselves happy to increase prices by about 10 to 30% for the night, there were those who felt confident enough to ask prices twice the usual rate, at times 250 to 400 euros. Airbnb had the largest price range, going from about 50 euros all the way up well into 4 figures. The town's 50-plus hostels, hotels, and inns were the first choice for early bookers, and their combined 3,000 beds got sold out back in September. However, through cancellations and additional offers that popped up, Tartu never really got full. While Airbnb listings made a grand record of 615 homes ready to open their doors, on the day of the gig, 108 of those were still available. A week before the concert, an estimated 75% of available properties had been booked. Airbnb gave us excellent data and it was clear that their clients were looking for independence. Over 95% of them opt to book an entire place of their own in July, leaving 4.7% in private rooms. Finally, a grand total of 3 people were content to just share a room. Neighboring languages were spoken the most, almost silencing English. Data collected lets us estimate that about 75% of visitors originated from just across our closest borders, meaning Helsinki, Riga, St. Petersburg, and Moscow. Data from bank card payments indicates there was a 36% increase in revenue from restaurants during those days. In total, Tartu saw a 13.8% revenue hike from the event, clocking in at a whopping €3.5 million. Tartu has been aiming to become the first CO2 neutral municipality in the Baltic states, and since the summer of 2019, all Tartu buses operate on compressed natural gas. The goal is to reduce private car use down to 20% of all travel by the year 2040. Anticipating the crowds, the smart city had played it smart. Routes leaving every 30 minutes encouraged visitors to opt for one of the 64 bright red buses fueled by the less polluting CNG. However, not everybody did that, and soon we saw bus schedules running behind, caused by congestion clogging the streets. With NO2 levels rising throughout the day, the long-term thinking of the Tartu Smart Bike Share system shone through. With the first 20 weeks of the bike share system had been a complete success, with more than 20,000 registered users and over 447,000 rides had been made, with a total mileage of 1.3 million kilometers. Today, as cars were busy filling the streets, the bikes took an effortless combined trip of over 16,000 kilometers. That's 2,000 more kilometers than just a week earlier. The hundreds and thousands of pings coming from bikes being pedaled across the town translated into a steady stream of dots on the map. This showed they came together to take largely similar routes towards the Estonian National Museum. Just as a cell tower on the bank of the river logged the passing of 3,200 users over the afternoon, another one, a few blocks down, began to pick them up. 2 hours later, we saw a third one take the heat and clocked in at 6,500 guests, pushing the technology to its limits. Despite the best efforts of our telcos, the jam of guests at the front gate around 8 p.m. still left a gridlock on the network. With most guests opting for an online QR code instead of a printed ticket, we hoped that they had the foresight to download this from the cloud before they got to the front gate. As the opening band Ecstasy of Gold rocked out to open the event, another member of the audience was checking out the area just as intently. A satellite with coordinates locked onto the airfield had been tasked with the special mission of measuring terrain displacement. It had already determined an 11mm sink where the tons of sound and stage equipment were sitting. This movement is normal and expected, and we are happy to say that the Estonian National Museum is still firmly in place. As the event came to a close, our cameras on the ring road picked up the spike of guests who had decided to not stay the night. However, other sensors were also catching our attention, namely the city center cell towers. They were recording close to 1,600 pings. And while this number isn't outrageous, this is the number you expect at 12 midday, not hours after midnight. It was well after dawn that the numbers started to drop, and this must have been one hell of a party. The celebrations had taken to the streets, parks, and the riverside. Local law enforcement, backed by several security companies and town officials, were watching over the cheerful crowds. As the morning dawned and the reports were filed, it became clear that it was the crowds themselves that had kept the party safe. Apart from a few drunk guys and impatient drivers, the date will be remembered as one of the least eventful on record. When we set out to process the gigabytes of files, we were expecting to see a town on its final stretch, struggling to maintain the lifestyle for locals and accommodate faraway guests. The reality was actually quite the opposite. We were pleasantly surprised to discover that despite having faced the most challenging event Tartu has ever hosted, the only truly out of the ordinary thing was that the biggest rock band in the world had visited Tartu, and indeed nothing was out of the ordinary. Thinking ahead and being smart had kept the city intact after a 65% hike in population over 24 hours, prompting the question, how big can we do this without breaking the city? The data gathered during the days Metallica visited Tartu is still flowing in and is still being analyzed further, and this might be the fuel to power the time machine that can provide that answer.